Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. First, let me tell you about two amazing sponsors who make this show possible. I'm a rather particular shark, and I only work with the best. First of all, let's talk inbound. I've worked with a great team at Invoca for several years now. From marketing to sales and commerce to CX, Invoca's active conversation intelligence platform enables revenue teams to create better buying experiences, drive more leads, and increase revenue. Trusted by top brands like Dish Network, Mayo Clinic, Mutual Omaha, Pods, and SunTrust, Greg and the Invoca team are doing some amazing work in turning conversational data into automated action to enhance digital touchpoints and human interaction. Secondly, let's talk outbound. I've known and worked with AC's team at Drip for years. Take a look at Drips, the founders of conversational texting, where they use conversational AI to help you reach customers where they're most responsive, and that's on their phones. And working with major brands like 3-Day Blinds, Liberty Mutual, Credit Repair, and Gainsco, Drips is leading the way for some of the biggest brands in the world to improve engagement rates and outcomes for their prospects and customers. Thank you to Invoca and Drips. And now back to the show. Let's talk social media. Your messaging on social media can be successful or not, depending on how you speak to your audience, when and where you speak to them, as well as to whether or not you're actually listening to them. The travel industry has and needed different messaging during the pandemic. Even with those players who were deemed essential, the idea of influencers, especially in luxurious travel locales, meant something a lot different during the pandemic than before. But the bigger question with social is, during a pandemic or not, are you making certain that your social media is on track with what your audience is hearing from you? And are you really leaning into that human connection? Nicole Lopez is the social media content lead at Amtrak, which is the National Railroad Service Corporation, servicing 500 locations throughout most of the U.S. and parts of Canada. And on this episode, we'll discuss social media channels and strategy, aligning the messaging, metrics that matter, sustainability with travel, collaboration, influencer marketing during a pandemic, Chuggington, Snowpiercer, and a lot more. So let's tune into a social media choo-choo manager with a shark who's all aboard on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. We're talking social media today, so tell us a little bit about your background in 240 characters or less. No, I'm just kidding. I'll spot you a few more. But tell us a little bit about your background.
Let's see if I can tweet it. So hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Lopez. I bring over 10 years of marketing communications experience with a specialization in digital communications and brand partnerships. And so really, I started off as a media planner. And I slowly saw, well, not slowly, rather, I saw it very quickly. I saw the evolution of everything going from out of home print to overnight 100% digital, 100% I need tracking, I need impressions. And so I was pretty much working as a planner in a very pivotal moment in the industry. And so I completely switched gears and I focused more on social media more than ever. And after my first gig as a media planner, I was then taken to a new agency. I worked in multicultural, and I was able to work with some amazing clients, some amazing top tier brands, inclusive of the NFL, MLB, Perry Ellis International, some really great brands to work with. And with them, I continued this path of working social media and digital brand partnerships. And so I got to work with the likes of Netflix, Spotify, Twitter, with just some really amazing accounts. From there, I moved to DC and I decided to go in-house. Yes, I finally crossed that barrier. I decided to go in-house, and I am now the social media content lead at Amtrak. So that's been my passion lately: transportation, sustainability, and really the future riders of tomorrow.
Well, I know back in 2020 when we first met, you sat on a panel that we did for a conference, and we really talked about the impact of COVID and all the crazy world we were living in particular with how that affected social. But I read through some of your highlights that you posted on LinkedIn, and you talked about some of the things that you saw. And I thought it was really interesting, especially when you talk about, a lot of times for a lot of people, trains aren't the first thing. But I was so impressed by all the different kinds of engagement statistics you put out there, that you had 30% more total engagement across the different channels in 2020 than the average of key brands in the travel and transportation vertical. You published a lot more posts that averaged more than the airline, car rental, and bus brands. Talk about a little bit about what your social media strategy was in 2020 during the pandemic that you think helped you become a lot more social as a brand.
Certainly. So really the proof is in the pudding. If you take a look at our channels, you'll see that we are an always on brand. Very organic, posting minimum 3 times a day. And again, it's all there for everyone to see. Essentially, we are the underdog when it comes to travel. Said it, trains are not top of mind for most people that are looking to travel, whether it's commuting or leisure travel. And so we don't have those same budgets. We don't have that same brand exposure. And the reality is, as we all know on social media, it's essentially pay to play nowadays. However, social media is about human connection. And so we really leaned into that strategy and realized that if we want to stay top of mind, we have to post like we are top of mind. And so we decided to adopt that always on approach. And that's why we post so much, and we were able to really beat our competitors when it came to everything from engagement to posting frequency. We just always gave ourselves that opportunity to connect with our basically all of our audience segments and across all of our platforms. Um, I really attribute our success, that 30% higher engagement, to that always on strategy, which I know can seem very intimidating for a lot of brands. And don't get me wrong, it's very it's hard to pull off. I will agree to that. However, it was absolutely worth it. 2020 was, even I could not believe the results that we had seen. We worked really, really hard with, as you can imagine, a skeleton crew with the pandemic, and given all of the uncertainties and circumstances we had, we were still able to pull through, despite just how bad the travel industry was going through it.
But were you not always on in 2019, or what? I mean, I guess part of it, I'm thinking of how much of it may have been that people were really embraced you as well, not just how you were always on, but how people wanted to travel when they couldn't.
So we started the always on strategy back in 2019. That was kind of when we were getting into a pace of things. We had finally gotten the resources we needed, and we were working towards that goal. I think the reality is a lot of people needed to realize that you need to capitalize on what's going on in the pandemic. People had nowhere to turn but social media. We had cut out all physical interactions with others. And so for the first time ever, people were genuinely on social media, and they were hungry to listen, to engage, to connect with others. Something else that was a key change to our strategy was a lot of brand love. And so in 2019, I would have easily said, occasionally we would post about something relating to our brand, our legacy, maybe something a little bit fun, but really it was just very ridership and revenue driven. However, in 2020, that just at one point was not possible. At various points, as we all know, it was always up and down as far as restrictions, whether or not people wanted to travel, COVID waves. And so because of that, we really had to stop and say, okay, who are we as a brand? What do people look for in us as a brand? And why should we even be talking right now? Because we all know that, especially in travel, if an airline were to post about going to a Caribbean adventure, more than likely you were going to get a peanut gallery of comments saying that it's irresponsible to promote travel. And so if we understood that and we really relied on social listening to figure that out, we pivoted in terms of what we talked about. So yes, we were always on, but we weren't always trying to stuff a train ticket down your throat. We were talking about who we are. We were talking about sustainability. We were talking about infrastructure, our plans for the future, and we were having fun with our followers. We were having a great time with them.
Yeah, you mentioned sustainability and some of the content I've seen you put as well. How is sustainability playing a role in the train and travel industry today?
Sustainability has been something that it's a pressure cooker. I'm sure that millennials and Gen Z can definitely identify that the climate is basically the next thing. There's this meme going around that I suffered through my 20s during the pandemic, and my 30s I'll lose to climate change, right? So it's very top of mind for the writers of tomorrow. And it was coming. However, I do feel that with the pandemic, it really brought all of those problems to the foreground, because not only were we going through just so many things between the pandemic, the recession, civil injustice, there were also a ton of natural disasters, and it really hit home that for the first time, natural disasters have always happened and they've only gotten worse, but now we have so many less resources and people are already suffering as it is. So when these natural disasters hit, it really, really hit. And so sustainability just comes top of mind. And quite frankly, it's all connected. Sustainability affects everything, whether it's jobs in the market to the air that we're breathing to our health, right? And so now the sustainability has this stronger spotlight on it in 2020. We really focused on talking about sustainability because we are one of these most sustainable ways of traveling in the United States, especially compared to long distance and comparing to our carbon emissions with driving or airlines. And so we felt it very pertinent that we talk about that because people are paying attention. They might not be traveling right now, but they're definitely paying attention and they're listening and they want to rethink the way they come back to normal, quote unquote normal, whatever that is. People are rethinking about that. So rethinking the commute, rethinking about where they stay, how they travel. And so keeping that cadence and really reminding people of just alternative options has been crucial to the business.
Yeah, so I would have been one of those people who would have enjoyed the palm tree picture or the Caribbean island that you talked about because I still did some travel to do some dives safely, of course. But how do you look at your social content as we come out of the pandemic? Because if you had put anything that reminded you of travel, although again, you're right, it would have looked socially irresponsible to promote people to travel. But at the same time, I aspirationally just wanted to be there. I mean, that's a different way of framing your content last year in 2020 as opposed to now that the world's coming out of the pandemic. How do you sort of look at the type of content that you're creating and posting on social channels based on where we are today from where we were before?
It's a tightrope. I'm sure
Yeah.
everyone can agree that it's tricky. I cannot really emphasize this enough. Social listening is crucial. And also just having a team that understands what's going on. So whether it's, reading the news, being in tune with what's going on, it's so important. And that will always be your guiding light. That will always tell you what's right, what's appropriate. Being Amtrak, we have a national network. And so it's not enough for me to say, I know what's going on in New York and that's that. No, I need to know what's going on in California and Texas and Florida. We have stations all over the country. And when we speak as a national brand, we have to be very mindful of how we talk about all these locations. And so we're not out of the weeds yet. We're still very careful about the way we talk about travel. And something that I think has also really benefited us in 2020 was to talk about the future. And so, we're ready when you are. We have been hard at work developing our infrastructure, improving our product, improving our services, everything from onboarding to the actual train experience, the way that we've upgraded all our digital offerings. We've put our heads down and gotten to work to make sure that when everyone is ready, we'll be there. And we have a brand new train experience for everyone. And so we're getting there. I really hope that by the time this podcast comes out,
Yeah, really.
it'll be a different conversation and we can be a little bit more aggressive in when it comes to promoting travel. For now, we've really been more about investing in our future and encouraging people to plan and dream and realize that we're there.
So, what were some of the things you did before, maybe pre-pandemic or 2020 and before, that you wouldn't necessarily have done now with a lot of your social content?
So I would say that something that we really didn't focus too much on then, but we're absolutely doing now is really pushing that brand love. So relying on the fact that we're a legacy brand and talking about our history and where we're going in the future to make those connections. It's also really been a great engagement point for us. It's something that really drives our engagement up. So when we talk about, for example, one of our destinations or one of our locomotives, it's the perfect point for someone to jump in and just talk about their memories, their relationship to the brand, and it just adds to that credibility for those new users that pop in. And so I would say that we didn't really too much of it back then. We didn't do too much of it simply because we were a little bit more focused on driving revenue and ridership. But I will say especially with how it's gone in the pandemic, we're absolutely going to keep doing it throughout the future.
How do you look at influencers for social content today? I know so much of so much of influencer marketing changed in 2020 with a lot of the pictures that were shown during pandemic that seemed like they were those inopportune moments. But now they're the kind of things that we want to see people go out and travel. And, we want to follow those kind of people that are doing the fun things we enjoy with travel. But how has that impacted what you've done, especially at Amtrak?
Well, in the spirit of transparency, we did have to pause all of our influencer marketing.
God bless you. Yeah. A lot of people didn't. A lot of people did, and they ate a lot of crow for it.
Well, really, safety is a priority at Amtrak. It's really our guiding force. And so we just did not feel that that was really the safest approach to our marketing. And so we did pause all of our influencer campaigns. However, we are planning for the future. And I think that's something that we are kind of chewing through are the overlaps. And so it is to say, prior to the pandemic, we had a social media residency program that focused on diversity. And we were basically, when I mean diversity, I mean cultural, neural abilities. It was basically the untold travel stories that we were looking for. That did really well for us pre-pandemic, and we just know that when we come back, those same message tracks are still going to hit, and they're still going to be what people are looking for. I think more than anything during the pandemic, there was kind of a paradigm shift when it came to travel influencers. Our travel influencers had nothing to talk about. So it was nothing but a lot of throwback Thursdays and
Yeah.
flashback Fridays. And, they had to change. So our travel influencers had to become infotainment, right? And so they had to either A, find a fun way to talk about their past trips, or B, venture out into the world, travel during a pandemic, and offer information that would help people that are also looking to travel. And so, kind of mimicking that overlap of, okay, who evolved and who are people actually paying attention to? I would say an influencer strategy to definitely take into consideration for the future is finding that overlap, right? So who is talking about travel, but isn't necessarily the same travel story of someone who quit their job and traveled the world, or after the pandemic decided to remain remote for the rest of their lives. That's just not, especially after a recession, that's not feasible. That's not something that everyone can relate to. And so I would say looking for those overlaps, and sometimes it doesn't have to necessarily be a travel influencer. It could be, for example, someone who loves hiking, right? Loves hiking, that's her thing. It's not necessarily travel. Maybe they're more about staycations. However, maybe partnering with them, maybe getting them on a train and going somewhere to check out a new destination and hike there. It could be anything also from conferences, someone who goes to conferences like you. That could also be interesting. So I'd say the overlap is a sweet spot. I think that someone who is just one category and done, I just don't see that that's really an area of growth, at least for the industry when it comes to influencers.
You feel like you paused it early enough?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and not everybody did. So, I mean, I'm giving you a virtual applause for doing so. There were not nearly enough. And
Well, it aligned pretty well. We had wrapped our Amtrak Take Me There social media residency program. It was our first leg, and it was the timing could not be more perfect. We had wrapped out around February. I would say like mid-February was when we closed that campaign, and we were going to go back and just review our analytics and figure out what were next steps. Lo and behold, March hits in 2020 and pandemic starts. And so we just all decided, okay, let's pause on this. And I agree with you. I did see some people that continue to do influencer marketing, and I'm not going to knock them because, quite frankly, we know influencer marketing works. It still works to this day. And it's not to shame anybody for doing it. It's just, at least for us, we felt that that wasn't the safest approach, especially if safety really is our priority. We want to lead by example. And so we decided to just defer that influencer program.
yeah, that's okay. You don't have to. I will. I'll knock them. It was dumb. So let's talk about the channels. How are you sort of looking at positioning that content across all the channels right now?
I'll say it again. Listening, listening, listening. Social listening is the number one thing. If we're not in the channels, and when I say social listening, I definitely don't want any of your listeners to say, well, you know what, I can't afford XYZ program. I can't afford this or that. It doesn't always have to be on those platforms. Those platforms are nuanced, and sometimes they can't capture some things that you can just find yourself natively. So if there's any gold nugget I could offer, it's get in the platforms and look for yourself and dig through. And a lot of these social channels have their own listening tools. For example, Twitter's been great. And so there's ways to dig through that. And essentially you'll get a, I like to call it a digital ghost of what that audience member is, right? So what are they really like on that platform? And from there you can decide, okay, how do we approach this? Can we make a joke? Can we have a more aggressive tone? Like what's the best way to communicate the message? Because at the end of the day, you have to communicate the same message across the board, right? If you are a company, you have a goal, whether that is consumer education or a call to action to sign up for something or sell something. So it's still the same goal. You just have to figure out, okay, how is it appropriate to say it on this channel?
So you're consistently driving a message about safety or a trip or a voyage, and you're running that across all the different channels, just with a different way of framing that message. Is that fair to say?
You can see it quite being transparent. You can definitely see it on our channels. Um, we're a small team, and so we just knew that there's so much to talk about when it comes to our brand. There's so much to talk about. And so we've really realized that through social listening that our audiences are very, very different when it comes to each channel. They're actually kind of astonishing. You would think there'd be some overlap, but we don't really see people following us across all of these networks. And so our Twitter follower might not be our Facebook liker, right? Or our people on TikTok might not be the same people that are on Instagram. And so, just as you adequately put it, it's the same message with a different accent. We just adapt a little bit to each platform, but we're still able to get that same core message across.
How do you take a legacy brand like Amtrak and create super fans on social media, especially when you talked about some of the changing faces and the younger faces that are now riding the Amtrak trains today? How do you take that legacy brand and really amp it up and make people excited about it?
Well, I'll start off kind of leveling here. And, we have rail fans, so people that love trains, they love transportation. And when I came to the brand, that was already checked off. Like we have those people. So we had to create different kinds of fans, right? So we have this amazing support from our rail fans, and they're always gung ho for us, always there to help us. Now we needed to create fans that went beyond that, right? And really, it comes down to, I love this saying, luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. And so I'll go back to the sustainability example. We knew, my team knew from the start, sustainability was going to be big. We knew that it was coming, and we thought it would take years, to be honest with you. And then the pandemic hit, and it just sped up the process. And now it's something that's front and center when it comes to travel. Green travel is huge. And we've been preparing for this. And so because of that, we've really had the amazing opportunity to talk about sustainability and create those fans. So now we are getting those super saves, we're getting those pin saves from people that want to travel more sustainably and are just adding to their searches for later on when they do decide to travel. And so I would say when it comes to figuring out what that super fan is, it's find your unique selling point and prepare for it. you know it's not about the right time in the market, it's about the timing in the market, right? So find the unique selling point, prepare for it, and slowly get started, start seeding it in, and there will come up an opportunity, a point in which your unique selling point will be the trending thing, will be the thing that's top of mind, and bam, you're already an industry leader, you have the credibility, and you have basically an armada of content ready to go to talk about those things. And that's how you win over a super fan. That's someone that will say, oh, hey, they aren't just talking about this because showed up on the news today. No, they've been talking about this for years, and this is someone that I want to follow and a brand that I believe in.
You're somewhat siloed in the sense that you're on the social content. If you look at channels, but how do you look at integrating your social in with your larger scale campaigns for the brand, whether it's through other forms of content marketing, stuff to put on the web, email campaigns? How are you sort of working as a team to tie all that together?
My When someone asks me what a day in life is for me at my job, it's meetings.
Yeah.
It's meetings. And I don't talk a lot in these meetings. I just listen. And when you work with such a large brand with so many different messaging tracks and media outlets to work with, I listen because, to your point, we talked about this a little bit earlier. When you approach my brand, you have to get the same story everywhere you go. It would be completely irresponsible to say, well, that's not what I heard on Twitter. On Twitter, you guys
Yeah.
tweeted this.
Right. Right.
That will not fly. I've always said this, especially when I started the job. I basically mentioned that whatever the media team says, yes, okay. I've always been about, if there is a larger campaign at play, let them go first and I can go second. I have no problem with that. And at the end of the day, it's a brand safety thing. One, to make sure that there's a concise message and to make sure you're not posting something that is inaccurate. Um, and two, it goes back to that marketing ecosystem. It's that brand synergy. And so I think there's a lot of people want to be the first to talk about a certain component about the business, and it's not about that. It's about making sure that whatever you say is accurate and you have the support to back that up. I think more than anything, nowadays social media is actually the first exposure that a lot of people have, especially when we think about our younger consumers. It's the first exposure they have to a brand. And they'll use that as, they'll thin slice and say, okay, this brand doesn't know how to talk to me on TikTok. So, you know what? I don't think they're for me. They're probably old school. Or let's say someone is on Instagram and they decide to click on the link in our bio. It opens up and the web page is not functioning properly. Maybe it's a little glitchy and it's just not the same experience that you had on social media. When you have these things that are just not aligning and the quality is not there and the messaging is not there, it makes an impact. It makes people think like this business does not have its stuff together. If they can't even get the messaging right, who knows what the service will be like. And so for me, it's always been about collaboration. I collaborate at all costs. I think it's very dangerous when only one person is in charge of messaging, in charge of strategy. I think that's really a way to set yourself up for failure. You always need perspective and you always need the support of basically your other marketing teams to make sure that what you're saying is accurate, appropriate, and at the end of the day, helps the business.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's actually bringing up some bad memories of when I was working on the brand side, and 95% of my day was sitting in meetings, and it was maybe 5% doing. That's what it felt like anyway. It will slowly erode your soul. Right.
It's tough, but
It's
it's
tough. Yeah.
doable and it's worthy. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely worth it.
So Nicole, I know travel's probably involved somewhere in this question, but what do you do for fun?
For fun. Oh my gosh. I feel like in the pandemic it's changed. What do I do for fun? I would say, for fun, I love fitness. Especially during the pandemic, it's been something that's kept me afloat mentally.
Yeah.
And so I love exercise. I love high intensity interval training. I love dance fitness. I'm a dance fitness instructor on the side. That's my
Me
passion.
too.
You are.
No, no, not at all.
So yeah, that's my hobby is physical activity, I guess you can say. And of
Uh,
course, travel as soon as it's okay to travel.
Well, so Nicole, you're from Miami, right?
Yes.
So you're from Miami, lots of sharks north of there, beautiful ones in Jupiter area, but you're now in DC where there's a lot more political sharks. You're on a shark's perspective. As you know, I'm nicknamed Shark. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
I think tiger sharks are beautiful.
God bless you.
Genuinely think they're gorgeous.
They don't get nearly enough press. They don't get nearly enough love.
It's a cool shark.
Well, Nicole, it's a special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Yes.
All right. Number 1, vacation time. Would you rather travel to the beach or travel to the city? This is almost like a Miami, DC kind of question.
Travel to the beach.
Good. All right. Number 2, again, travel for social media, Instagram or TikTok?
I'm gonna age myself and say Instagram.
Oh, you're so old. Yeah, I know. You're 1,000 years younger than me, so you're fine. Number 3, Chuggington or Thomas the Train?
You know what? I don't know if I'll get in trouble for this, but I really don't have much exposure to Chennington. I'm all about Thomas the Train.
Okay. Sadly, I've watched way too many of the cartoons with my son. So, all right. Number 4, Murder on the Orient Express with Daniel Craig or Snowpiercer with Chris Evans.
Snowpiercer.
Okay. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Biscuits.
Okay. Why? It was like you were scared there for a second. So, all right,
It was
Nicole,
hard.
where can people find out more about you, connect with you on social channels and more?
I would say as it pertains to social media, check me out on LinkedIn. I love connecting with other professionals on there, and I share a ton of crazy stuff that I do for social media. It's a weird and wild career, so definitely check me out there, and I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Nicole, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
So there was my conversation with Nicole Lopez, the social media content lead at Amtrak. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, you don't have to be the biggest player with the biggest budgets on social. I love it when she really went into this. And if you're on the brand side, don't listen to all the dopey advice out there about how you get these top Instagram hacks without thinking through if it has anything to do with a corporate logo brand rather than a personal social brand. That advice can be crazy different. However, for all, social media is about human connection, so lean into that direction even when you're a legacy brands. It works even for big brands like Amtrak. Second, sometimes you can tell the right story. Make a pivot to your audience at the wrong time. During the shutdown, the natural reaction was to not talk travel, especially at the first when a lot of influencers were posting not great pics of places they obviously weren't. And there is not always a right answer. But there is a safe one, and that in the travel industry is tempered with some nostalgia about places we've been or where people wanted to go. Make it aspirational, if you will, once the world opened back up. It isn't necessarily hiding your head in the sand for years. You can tell the same story often when just applying some better messaging around responsibility. Third, with all your teams, align your messaging. Say no to silos. She says collaborate at all costs. Love that. What I love too in regards to their aligned message was something as simple as safety as that red thread throughout their messaging. It's not the hottest beach destinations or the mountaintops and rainbows. It's safety. Great message. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I'm so thankful to everybody who listens. Thank you also to the amazing sponsors at Invoca and Drips. Today is going to be an amazing day, and I am ready to get back in the water. Whether I get there by planes, trains, or automobiles doesn't matter to me. Stay safe out there and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.